Live on all platforms as far as you can tell.
We just went there, kind of in the middle of your sentence. I have not seen it come in on Instagram yet. There it is. Clicking the button on Instagram. I think we're doing okay.
It's giving us a lot of latency with the viewers popping in. There's the first one. Oh,
we got?
Trush.
Facebook. Doreen got the first comment.
Oh, it didn't
Doreen
come up for
now
me.
representing Virginia.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Trush presumably representing Missouri on YouTube.
How come I can't see Doreen's comment? Why? Have we screened her comments out?
I don't know. I don't know how that works. I don't think so.
We have a bunch of clearance you have to make it through, Doreen.
Man, we got Vanessa on Instagram. Are you seeing Instagram comments?
I'm seeing Trush. I see Vanessa.
Okay.
I see Tron.
Yeah.
Tron Hammer.
YouTube and Instagram.
There's Doreen. Okay.
She's
just so dangerous. Doreen is so dangerous that now whatever runs our platform has to lag her comments.
I know. I got it right away. I don't know.
Oh my goodness gracious.
We got Tennessee represented. We got all kinds of people here today. This is going to be great.
Man. And we're going to have fun today because this was like the smallest parking lot. We call our massive like Google Doc where we store all of the questions that come in our parking lot. And this was the cleanest parking lot I've seen in a very, very long time. So famous last words, because I'm sure I'll be wordy as I'll get out and we won't have the time I think I have. But hopefully our live audience came prepared to just sprinkle this entire conversation. What does Paul say? Let your conversations be full of grace, seasoned with salt. Apparently Paul likes a low sodium diet. Conversational diet.
Rockin' for him 97 on Instagram wants to know where to submit a lengthy question. And depending on how lengthy, I'm not sure. See how many words you can get into an Instagram comment. Anyone who wants to submit a question can just put those in the comments. I will be flagging those as we go and sprinkling them in. But if it's so lengthy that it doesn't fit in an Instagram comment, I guess you can go to the BEMA website, but then who knows when that's going to get addressed. So
who knows? All right, everyone. Well, here's some things you need to know. Number one, our next Q&A is currently scheduled for Sunday, September 20th. It's scheduled for 8 p.m. Eastern time. We're doing our GMT edition today. So this is in the middle of the afternoon for a lot of us. But we do this that people in Europe and some of our international listeners, this time slot's a little bit more accessible to at least many of them. So I don't know how many of them are popping in from across the pond in either direction, but we're glad to have you if that's you. But we're going to go back to our normal 8 p.m. Eastern time on September 20th. I have asked Elle. She just hasn't. She may get back to me by the time our live stream is over today. As of this point, she has not seen my message. But either September or October, we're going to try to get Elle in here for a live stream. She's got a bunch of questions I have piled up for her. So it's time for her to get in here. We're going to see if she wants September. And if she wants September, but September 20th doesn't work, we may move the date. So stay tuned. But currently, we're scheduled for September 20th, 8 p.m. Eastern. Same bat time, same bat channel. We are on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter /X, Instagram. There are, as usual, so many questions, but less questions than usual. So, all right. If there's nothing else I need to add, Brent, I'm going to jump right in.
Well, we've got, I don't know how you say this name, Sue from Hungary. Appreciating the hour of our live stream. So, thank you.
Sue from Hungary. I love that. Everything about that makes my heart happy. Okay. I love that.
All right.
Okay. Well,
on to the questions.
I'm on to the questions. Ryan sent a question in, and Ryan, I have flagged this question for Reed as well. So I'm going to answer it, but I have also, if Brian Trushinger is watching and he put his name in the comments, it's his job to send this question over to Reed's parking lot as well. So in like 7 months or 8 months from now, you're going to get an email notification that Reed has answered your question, because your question was to both of us. During our Q&A, you were at one of our events, Ryan, and you said during our Q&A, both Marty and Reed shared on the health of college ministries within their respective circles. Reed regarded how diverse and inclusive his college ministry is. Students may belong to separate churches as adults and who often hold conflicting views on a variety of topics. The students do not view agreement as a requirement for community or for feeling a sense of belonging. I find this beautiful, as do I, Ryan. I long for this in my life and for everyone else and for everyone everywhere. In many ways, a ministry like that is a model for how I hope we all can live. Yet, a part of me feels defensive. I appreciate, Ryan, this honesty and vulnerability and self-awareness. I think that students, Ryan says, have it easy. They're in an environment where they are more or less forced together. School does that. Friendships feel safer in a school environment. In adult life, I find it difficult to maintain friendships through adversity. It's too easy for people to simply leave a church or a friendship and make themselves anonymous. Why push through conflict when it can be avoided with no consequence? One may think. So my question is for advice on how to push past this defensiveness and how to thrive in the reality of a culture in which I find myself. Ryan, I already said it, but just thanks for the self-awareness, the introspection, like the openness to that. Yeah, I just really appreciate the way you phrased that question. And I think in large part, yeah, I think you're right. And I'm usually pretty defensive of college students. So anybody that, when I very first read this question for the very first time, Ryan, I can remember getting to that line and immediately being like, "Whoa, Ryan," because you were like, "I think college students have it easy." But I actually think you're really right in a lot of ways here in there's a lot about the college environment and the academy that facilitates flourishing and success in the areas that we're talking about here. And so, yeah, and your defensiveness is not only accurate, it's probably well warranted. It is a little bit more difficult. On the flip side, we're also more free. The academy is not just a place that facilitates that, it's also a place that kind of requires it. I'm in the academy right now. I'm doing my grad work. My grad work forces me to engage conversations that I would never show up for in the rest of my, and I'm even sympathetic to a lot of these spaces, and I would just not voluntarily show up into those spaces. So the ironic flip side to this is that we, as adults, we also have more freedom, and we usually don't use freedom to push in. We use freedom to do exactly what you talked about, which is run away or disengage or escape or take the path of least resistance. And so your question, how to push past this defensiveness, don't do that. Don't. Sometimes you ought to. Sometimes you need to. Sometimes you need to take the path of least resistance. Like sometimes that is very much a part of yeah. But then there are other times where you get the chance to lean in, to pursue some of the things that you're noticing can be a model. And here's the thing. We don't have to get it all right. We don't have to get an A+. We don't have to knock it out of the park and get a home run. We just have to get a couple small wins. We have to lean in and do. I think we underestimate what a couple small things can do. What a few well-planted seeds, well-watered seeds can grow into. So we don't have to like perfectly mimic the model exactly. We there's just some really beautiful. So yeah, I love your self-awareness, and I think I agree with everything you said. And let's try to do that together. Let's try to build that. It just happened to me again the other night. I'm scrolling through Instagram, right? I get on Instagram and I'm just doing the whole doom scrolling through reels. Only my algorithm did it. I don't know. I wish I could make this happen. Like I wish I could press a button and make my algorithm do this, but somehow my algorithm like fell into this sink of just goodness. Like the potential of what we can do when we show up for people. And somehow I had liked enough of the right stuff and I had shared enough of the right stuff where my algorithm was just like, bam, 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 inspiration, inspiration. We can do this. Look at humanity. Gosh, we're awesome. Unity, solidarity. Like it was just, and I just loved every moment of it. So then there are other days where I'm like, this stuff will never happen. Give me a break. So it's all about what we choose to believe in. But I really appreciate your question, Ryan. Tim says this. Tim says, Marty and Brent, I want to start with a huge thank you for the work you've put into the Bema podcast. Give you a little context on, he says he's midway through season 6. So I want to give you a little context why this is so important to me. Has a degree in pastoral studies, 5 years of academia in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Hebrew professor, thesis advisor. Dr. Hans, boy, I wish I could say this name, Spalteholtz, was a literary professor with a rich love for Hebrew. Brought the Old Testament to life for Tim. Fast forward 25 years. And what you two have done is remind me of that, which is a huge compliment, Tim. I received that with grace and humility because I can hear how much this mentor and professor impacted you in a positive way, and that we would remind you of that is beautiful. Like you, Marty, I was brought up in Central Washington, an evangelical household. Worked for a college, passion for mission work, left confused by theological systems. He promises to land a plane soon. I don't mind. Tim, you're so far, it's a joy to read. Eventually, my ideas on theology and concerns about the church gelled into a few categories, but one of the most challenging for me was the concept of hell. It goes something like this. In evangelical circles, penal substitutionary atonement is the centerpiece of the gospel. I appreciate how you point out what a bizarre picture of God that limited perspective paints. It's almost always presented that God is horrified by us and stays his hand of destruction. I think there are obvious issues with landing an entire theology there. It's bigger than that. And I think that much of Protestant theology unravels at this very juncture. Since St. Augustine, the emphasis of our sinful nature has been a critical component. I'm skipping stuff, by the way, for everybody. It's for sake of brevity, but still wanting you to hear this. Doesn't invite you into the kingdom of God or convict you to repentance. It's our typical theological system. It doesn't invite you into the kingdom of God or convict you to repentance. It simply roots us in the problem. This is what I've been talking about, by the way, Tim. I remember the name. Is it Tim? Tim? Yes, Tim. Tim, this is what I've been talking about on Book Tour a lot, because you're absolutely right. Our typical theological systems makes it all about a very narrow, pinpointed problem and not a wider, more robust conversation. I've presented this idea to friends and family and can tell it makes them uncomfortable, but so far no one has been able to provide a compelling answer. With the interpretive lens you've taken in Bema, I feel like this problem simply dissolves. Jesus simply is not teaching this lesson. Quite the opposite in many ways. I love that paragraph, Tim. It's one of my favorite paragraphs in your whole message here because, there's a lot of things like this that when we get done with Bema, sometime like the first 5 seasons, and people will come back and say, but you never talked about this. You never talked about this thing. And one of my favorite responses is, yeah, it never came up. Like we went through the whole Bible and that thing never came up, which is just fun to say. So for this and more, I want to say thank you deeply for the change in my perspective and sharing your experiences. It means a lot to me and provides me with more than just challenging questions to share with those around me. What you guys are doing is important. Please keep up the great work. Yeah, I just wanted to share that message. There was no real question in there, and yet a lot of really great things about Tim's message about where he's coming from, his expertise that he brings, and why he resonates with the material. But then just some of these theological observations, which he talks about gelling with other things. I think it gels so much with what we're out on Book Tour talking about right now, and I could not agree more. Sometimes the very centerpiece of our theological wrestling match is something that doesn't show up if you don't project it and force it onto the larger theological conversation. Sometimes that, I love that. So, all right, well, we got some live action coming in here. Not only do we have somebody from Hungary, but good morning from Australia. That's pretty great. I'm assuming that name is Tasha. So Tasha, I was going to try to say good day with a Australian accent, but that would probably be inappropriate or just horrible. So I'm just
You can do it, Marty. You can do it.
I can't do that. Good day, Tasha.
Yes.
See, I
Yes.
can't. Okay. I feel like I've done something so horrible.
Channel your Robert Irwin.
Crikey.
It could be
Tasha
as
woke
early as 4 a.m., depending on what part of Australia Josh is in. Probably more 6 or 7 a.m., most likely.
Tasha.
But
Tasha woke up and turned on Facebook and said, "Is that a live stream? Let's get closer."
beautiful. Beautiful.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's a YouTube comment from Tron or Hammer or
Yeah.
TH.
Who knows? I don't know the real name, so I can't actually answer the question here because I don't know if we have any questions from this person already in here.
Oh,
But this person is wondering if questions have already been submitted on the website. Do we need to not repeat them in the chat? And I don't know because I don't have the names.
I mean, if they made it through, if they made it in, then yes, they have been dealt with in the parking lot. The only thing that would get in your way is if they didn't actually make it through, which sometimes we've had technical difficulties, but I feel like it's been a very long time since that was happening. So they should have been in the parking lot, and they will either show up in our conversation or, for whatever reason, they're not showing up in our conversation. Or I've
Could
passed them
have
on
been
to,
flagged for L.
L or Reed, or Brian if it was a chiasm question.
Yep.
So it could go a lot of different places, but it hopefully made it to us. So who knows, Tron, what your real name is? You don't have to tell us, but that's how I would be able to tell you.
We do have so many questions that come in, so we definitely don't address all of them. And if you have the chutzpah to show up for a live Q&A during the broadcast and submit it in the comments, especially if you show up early in the Q&A, that could be the best route to get it in there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, there you go, Tron. Do with that what you will. You can just keep posting stuff. You might get it through the second firewall, and then I'll be forced to deal with your question, even if I struck it out of the parking lot earlier. How about that? There's a parable about a persistent widow who just would not stop bugging the judge. And the judge was like, all right. And Jesus said, how much more? God to you. Brett, not Brent, Brett with 2 T's, says to Marty, Brent, and the Bema team. First off, thank you for your work and all you do with your material. It's challenged and expanded the way I interact with the text. All this wonderful thank yous. Thank you, Brett. The teaching is recorded. I'm a Jesus follower who stumbled across something in the text that after I shared it with my pastor, I was asked to teach on it. The teaching is recorded, and I will send you a link. Brett, I need to tell you first and foremost, before I even get into this question, I did not have a chance to go back and watch your message, so I have not seen it or listened to that, but I'm going to try to deal with it anyway. It is something that I was not taught in my time of inductive Bible schooling, and I'm still wrestling with the implications of this as a follower of Jesus. In a world that tends to separate Christianity from its Jewish origin and frame it as a new religion that Jesus established and spoke about at Caesarea Philippi when he says, I will build my church. Is he building something new? That whole idea. If Jesus and the subsequent movement now called the church is a constant continuation of what Adonai has been doing since the beginning and not a new religion, what does that mean for us Jesus followers today as we deal with theological assumptions and sometimes harmful results of the walking out of those assumptions? I see many good-hearted people fulfilling their interpretation of the Bible, yet if the initial interpretive lens that they are given and taught is abolishing Jesus as the Word, where do we go from here? Great question, Brett. Through church history, I see many times the pendulum swinging back and forth as time goes on. Yet what would happen if we return to the plumb line? Would the clock finally stop ticking as we usher in the return of Messiah? Do we even know where the plumb line is? I hear you in the revelation of text to context as the application of God's word is transformative power. If we don't find it, will we just swing the pendulum again for another time, hoping that the next generation will discover where to stand? Hopefully we can at least pass the baton well enough instead of striking the rock with it. Whoa, fun little remez there, Brett. I noticed that. Anyway, I'll get off my stump. Another remez, I believe. Below is the video link to my teaching. Brett, first of all, just thanks for sending that in. I think it's again just a spot on question. a large part of what we're trying to deal with throughout all 10 seasons of Bema and the future and what's to come. I do hope to write about this in the future myself. I have a book proposal that I hope becomes reality. I don't know, sometime in the next decade, where I want to write about Jewish Christian relationships and some sense of returning to a proper placement. Not that everybody would have to see Judaism or a Jewish hermeneutic, but I think there is relative consensus on the origins of Christianity, generally where we come from, how it maps out historically, enough that we could have a pretty robust conversation about those things. Overplaying that hand is I think a part of the danger that you're asking about here. Like we become aware of how we have set up something new, framed the story away from and pointed away from the very Judaism we kind of come out of. And so you're like, man, if we were to get that framing right, if we were to turn back around, if we were to point it back in the right direction, what happens if we align all those things? I tend to agree. I think 5 or 10 years ago, I didn't agree. I was like, oh, don't get caught up in that. Don't waste your time trying to do that. Don't. And the more I think I wrestle with different things and study the Jewish Christian history and relationship, the more I think there is some potential power in the movement the framing you're talking about. I also think that over striving or forcing it will actually cut the legs out of the very thing that we need to do. So I think we want to be very careful, generous, and gracious, make sure that we're a part of a larger conversation. We're listening to all these other voices that are going to see some of those things differently, point the conversation in different, like let the whole body of Christ and people of Israel, I'm not talking about nations, political nations, I'm talking about covenant peoples, like let those things do their thing. There was a writer, Jen Rosner, we've had her on the podcast before, and she did a lot of her work connected to Franz Rosenzweig. And I've started using some of his conversation in my own grad work. And he's this Jewish scholar. He was ethnically Jewish, born in a Jewish home. He set out to convert to Christianity, and then on his way, didn't end up converting to Christianity, remained Jewish, but was kind of this mystical Jewish philosopher who began speaking of the relationship between Jew and Gentile. And man, read about him on Wikipedia, on the internet, Franz Rosenzweig, and look at his time in history as it relates to like World War II and some pretty substantial things that are happening. And then consider what his main work is called The Star of Redemption. It's usually sitting behind a paywall. An English translation, at least, is usually sitting behind an academic paywall. But if you can ever get your hands on it, it's the last 50 to 100 pages. Everything else is really hard to follow. It's very mystical, but there's a whole bunch of stuff there. And I love to read it. And basically he talks about Judaism. Think of like God has this star, this redemptive star, the star of redemption. And Judaism is the heat and energy of the star. Christianity is the rays of the star. And God's redemptive work cannot do what it's supposed to do without both, Rosenzweig said, as a Jew who doesn't follow Jesus. He said, without Judaism, you don't have the regenerative heat. You don't have the power of the star, the power of the work. And yet without the Gentiles, that power, that work doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything. So God needed the Gentiles to take that redemptive work out to the nations, out to the rest of the world. But without the Jews, that work becomes empty and hollow. I have found the whole conversation. I don't think it's the end of the conversation. I think it's this beautifully inspiring framework to talk about this relationship of Jew and Gentile together. So I think there's a lot of work to do. I'm with you, Brett. And I also think don't make this too quick don't overplay our hand. Don't cut the corner. There's a long journey. There's a long, winding journey to get back to where you're talking about. And that entire journey matters, or will truncate the whole, like we'll cut off the whole work at its root, if you will. Okay, Hunter says, sorry for the wall of text. It's a nuanced question and topic. I have a question about covenants. Oh, this is a good question, Hunter. This is a good question. My Baymouth group is nearing the end of session 4, and we're trying to work through this. We're mapping out the 3 big Torah covenants and their signs. The Noahic covenant, the sign is the rainbow. The Abrahamic covenant, the sign is circumcision. And the Sinai covenant, the sign is Sabbath. We totally get the point that Gentile Christians should not be circumcised, per Paul. Here's our big question. If we as Gentile Theosebes are invited into the Abrahamic covenant, why is Paul so emphatic that we don't take the sign of that covenant? I often hear it taught that circumcision is the sign of the Sinai covenant, but I don't see that in the text. Sabbath is the sign of the Sinai covenant, not circumcision, which you seem to make the case that as Theosebes we should observe Sabbath because it has its roots further back in the creation story and is more moral, ethical than Miksat Ma'aseh HaTorah. Also, you make the point that in Turkey, Hunter's been with me in Turkey, that the gospel is about unity, not uniformity. That Theosebes following the laws of Sinai creates uniformity, which seems to be what Paul argues against in Galatians. An outsider seeking a pork-eating Gentile sharing a table with a kosher Jew is what puts the gospel on display. What tie does circumcision have to Sinai, as they seem to be from 2 different covenants? Do you have any thoughts on why circumcision has been subbed out for baptism for Theosebes, but not for Jews? Is that the correct replacement for the sign of the Abrahamic covenant? Okay, this is super complicated, Hunter. It is the spot on question, but it's super, super complicated. You have identified the covenants and the signs appropriately, in my opinion. I would even add the Adamic covenant, the Adamic covenant in front of the Noahic covenant, to which I would put Sabbath as a sign, maybe with a little s. Noahic covenant sign is the rainbow. Okay, got it. Abrahamic covenant sign is circumcision. I do believe that's in the text. Sinai covenant, the sign was supposed to be the Sabbath according to the Exodus. And for that one, I might say the capital T, Sabbath, capital S, the Jewish Sabbath for the Sinai covenant. However, in the rabbinic conversation, that's not how they talked about it. In the rabbinic conversation of Paul and of Jesus, the rabbinic world, even though what you've identified in the text is correct, the rabbinic world in conversation had linked the Abrahamic and Sinai covenant. That's why they're saying Gentile Christians have to become a part of this. Paul's unlinking those to make an entrance into the Abrahamic family. But the rabbinic conversation equated circumcision, not because it's this is where you get hung up, not because it's the sign of the covenant. It's not what they're doing. Circumcision is not a covenantal sign, an indication that you are Torah observant. And they've connected that to Abraham. That's what Hillel and Paul are arguing against. Is they're saying Torah observance isn't linked to Abraham, it's linked to Moses. And everything I just said right there in those last 2 sentences is disconnected from covenants and signs. I understand why you're wanting to put those together and make that work. Boy, that would be beautiful if the conversation did that. But the rabbinic conversation was separate from that. They weren't having signs and covenants conversations. That was not on the table. They weren't trying to make that work. They were having a religious family Torah observance conversation. And what Paul is doing, still independent from signs, forget whether or not what is Sabbath the sign of, what is circumcision the sign of, forget about that. Paul's simply saying Abraham's not connected to Torah observance, and circumcision for the rabbis is about Torah observance. Don't connect it to this covenant of Abraham in the conversation. It is, but Abraham doesn't have a Torah to observe. So Abraham's circumcision is not a Sinai circumcision. The Sinai circumcision, when they talk about circumcision in the rabbinic conversation, they're talking about all of Torah observance, right? That's a Sinai conversation. And Paul is saying Abraham doesn't have anything to do with Torah observance. Abraham has to do with faith. That's what Abraham has to do with. And that's why the Gentiles are invited into the Abrahamic family, not the Mosaic family, not the Sinai family. And the family that matters is the family of faith, is Paul's argument. I reserve the right to change my to hate my language on that. But that's a great conversation. And all your pieces are correct. They're not relevant to the question you're asking. But I totally understand, because I have wrestled with the exact same thing that your group is wrestling with here. But those mechanics are irrespective of the conversation we're having in season 4. Very frustrating, because it would be a lot cleaner if they would have kept that conversation, but that's not. They're having a separate conversation from covenants and signs. I hope that made sense. I would probably need 10 more minutes to make that make better sense. Oh no. Oh, Brent, do we have we need live content. Where's all the live? We're already at rapid fire responses, and we're only 30 minutes in.
I'm actually a little bit excited about this.
Oh, hooray.
We'll see what happens. I just got one other question in, and somebody on YouTube was asking where to submit questions, so I just told them that. So I think we got some more questions, but yeah, we will need more questions.
Get to working, viewers.
I will say though, so Darius's birthday party is today after this Q&A, but Maggie has wised up to your Q&A ways, and she scheduled it a full 2 hours after the Q&A ends.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, we've wised up too. I have dinner as soon as this Q&A is over, and she was like, "I'll plan it for 6," and I'm like, "Better plan it for 6:30." You know me, I ain't gonna be ready.
All right.
All right. Well, if it's that time and we don't have any live stuff, let's take care of these rapid fire responses. Rapid fire responses. God, I love our theme music. It's just so great. All right. Rapid fire response, which doesn't have to be very rapid fire because it's 4:32. Levi says, "Hello, Bema co-hosts. I just wanted to write an appreciation for you and all the work you do. Bema has much influenced my walk with Christ in the most positive way possible. I heard this style of teaching through someone who comes through teaching our Bible schools here at YWAM. He left me with an array of resources to study and suggests that Bema is the best place to start. It's been almost a year since I started the podcast, and am only on to episode 100. It's amazing seeing how differently I read the scriptures now compared to a year ago. I have been preparing for a week of teaching and calling and identity, and found myself spending way too much time in genealogy than I would have ever guessed. Many blessings to the Bema crew who have made an impact on the other side of the globe." I mean, Levi, I put this, it was a rapid fire response because you said thank you, and I want to say thank you for your thank you. These messages, we don't share them all. A lot of them come in. I share a few of them here and there. And they just mean a lot to us. And this is exactly why we do this. We love to turn other people loose. Anytime somebody says, not you're our Bible answer catalog, but you have helped me do this for myself, that is money. That is everything we do this for, is to equip us all to think better, to inspire us. When people say, like, I'm inspired to get into my Bible again, like I wasn't, like the Bible was dusty, dead, bleh, and now it's like full of life and color and inspires me, that kind of stuff, man, that is what we do. And you wouldn't believe, Levi and others, when you send, I'm not asking you to flood our inboxes with like, thank you. But when you do send those, you'd be surprised at how many times a few of those counteract just something really beautiful. Or excuse me, they do something beautiful by counteracting some stupid negative comment or some dumb message that comes in or whatever. Because social media is a dumb place. So there you go. I love that. Thanks, Levi. Oh, Benjamin says, what topics regarding Second Temple Judaism do you feel the most uncertain about? or feel like scholarship doesn't have any good answers for, or any that you are most curious about. I still don't know what to do with a lot of Heiser's work in terms of the larger academy. I don't just mean Heiser's work. I mean the kind of stuff that Heiser talks about, divine counsel, um, how much to play on some of that apocalyptic framework, Enoch, all that kind of stuff. Like I just sometimes I don't know how to feel about all of that. Scholarship doesn't have what most uncertain about. Scholarship doesn't have good answers for. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I'm just gonna say a bunch of things that I regret since it's rapid fire responses. I'm just gonna those are some of my thoughts that immediately come to mind. It's really not an answer to your question, but I'm surprised at how quickly there are some assumptions that are just made in the academy, like in scholarship. Like this is just the position, and it's not engaged critically. It's just like this is it, and we all just kind of accept it and move on. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, time out. Meanwhile, I'll put forward an idea from the people that taught me or the scholarship that influences me, and they're like, well, we don't know that for sure. I'm like, well, how come we knew what you just said for sure, like 5 minutes ago? We know that for sure, and nobody asked any questions about it. But this we don't know anything about. It's just so weird. Like what is accepted? It's just like, oh, of course we know that. And then other things that are like, well, we can't say that. Still bugs me, obviously. So, Tom, my message is to Marty Solomon. Uh-oh. Tom is going to say something very nice, I think. I just finished episode 280 where you discussed getting back to Eden. Thanks for sharing your heart and caring for those of us who habitually listen to your podcasts. You are causing my desire to know more about scripture in the background I had little idea existed. You have been inspiring to me to ask more and more questions of the text and their Jewish teachings. About 8 months ago, my niece visited here in Ohio from Colorado. She told me about Bema. Being a fan, suggested I listen to you. I started and continue to most of the time enjoy what you have to say. I love that. Most of the time. I appreciate that, Tom, because that's the way it ought to be. You reminded me of a guy, Ray Vanderlaan, I listened to 20 years ago. Yes, your mentor. If I reminded you of him, I'll take that as a great compliment. Being older and liking things in order. I have followed chronologically ever since and hope someday to catch up with the newest podcast. I write to be an encouragement to you and the people associated with you. You are causing me to look at the scriptures I have been reading almost daily for more than 56 years. I know I'm drawing closer to Christ and the Father after listening to you. Thank you. Yeah, Tom, there's another thank you message I wanted to share. Yeah, and maybe I wanted to share that for my own benefit because there are days and times and weeks and YouTube comments that just get under your crawl, and sometimes messages like this remind me, yeah, this is worth doing, and it's helpful. So that's great. Thanks, Tom. Oh, YouTube. Preppy coquette girl. Coquette? Who knows? I don't know why I wanted to turn that into something French, but nevertheless, do you think it's possible that the people at the Tower of Babel actually used telepathy to communicate, and that's what God took from them when he made them disperse? I don't think that, but it's a fantastic idea. Like, anybody that knows me knows I'm all in for a good Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Ghost Hunters episode on cable television. So telepathy at the Tower of Babel. Hey, it's the first time I ever heard that idea. It's pretty good. Rapid fire response. Not throwing shade, but no, I have not thought of that before. Brian says, first, thank you all for the work you've done to create the Bema podcast. It has truly shaped me and my understanding of God and the plot of the story more than I can express. I work to read through the entire Bible every year. I started the year today and noticed something in Genesis 1:26. God said, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock and wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. Who is God referring to when he says us? A quick Google search tells me it could be referencing the Trinity or angelic council, which is what I just referenced a moment ago, Brian, when I was talking about Heiser's work and the Divine Council, and other people have talked about it. It's not just Dr. Michael Heiser, but he's probably the most popular name, passed away a handful of years ago. And is kind of the popular source today for folks to read about that. He wrote a book called The Unseen Realm. Talks a lot about the divine council amongst a bunch of other things in there. The Midrash seems to lean towards angelic council idea too. Yes, not completely, by the way. It's not the only Jewish idea, but they do lean towards the divine council. That is correct. I wanted to see what you all thought. Yeah, Brian, I would be, I mean, obviously as a Christian, I could lean towards things like just the Trinity. I could lean towards, obviously it's not going to be in Jewish thought, and I would wrestle with whether or not that's author's intent when it comes to Genesis. Author's intent would seem to line up far more with something similar to the divine council. And so that's what I tend to, of all the different ways to explain that, and there are a handful, I tend to lean that way as the most plausible, most likely for the author of Genesis. So I'm with the internet on that one. Facebook comment from Shane. Man, it's been a while, I feel like, since I seen Shane's name pop across my algorithm or social media for one reason or another. Hello, gentlemen. Before my questions, I want to say thank you. Marty, for making the trip to Kingsport. Shane, were you in Kingsport? Is that where I know you from? Fantastic. Kingsport was fun. Kingsport is always fun. I forgot how fun Kingsport is. And the last time I came through, it's been one of my favorite stops on book tour. I love my friends at Kingsport. I started the spiritual discipline of verse memorization. I'm currently working my way through the Sermon on the Mount. In my daily reading, I'm currently reading through the book of Psalms. While reading through Psalm 37, something jumped out to me and wanted to get your thoughts. My question, do you believe that there is a connection between the Beatitudes and Psalm 37, specifically verse 11, but the meek will inherit the land? Or is that just a coincidence in the NOA translation? Thank you to you and the rest of the team for all you do. Without a doubt, Shane, I have a high confidence level that the Beatitudes are remezing different passages. That is one of the ones I am most confident about. That makes me believe that the other Beatitudes are also remezing. So I don't think all the Beatitudes are connected to Psalm 37, but the meek, verse 11, you said, but the meek inheriting the earth absolutely connects in my mind to Psalm 37. So that means, what does the poor in spirit connect to? And again, what's going to frustrate me is we're probably going to miss some of the connections, because I think Matthew wasn't originally written in Greek. I think Matthew is written in Hebrew originally, and then doesn't even sometimes get translated well into the Greek. And so that makes us miss, like, what would poor of spirit, how would you have said poor in spirit in the Hebrew? How does that show up? Where does that remez get linked? It's harder to do when you're looking at the Greek. Doesn't freak me out when it comes to biblical inspiration or the New Testament being inspired, or that our version of the Gospel of Matthew isn't correct. None of that. It just, on a matter of textual criticism, I wish I could make some of those connections cleaner and easier and quicker if I had that Hebrew translation that I believe was probably original, but it's what we got. But yes, I think that's a hard yes for me. That particular beatitude to Psalm 37 is a hard yes for me. And there could be other things that I'm not thinking of, but I love where our heads are at. And I would just be like, thumbs up, you're doing the thing. You're doing the thing. So yes. Katie says, just re-listened to episode 89, season 3. Marty said that the outer veil of Herod's temple had the zodiac sewn into it, according to Josephus. When I looked it up, the sources I saw, generated by AI, said that there were other mystical elements embroidered on it, and excluding. I don't know if that. So no zodiac on the outer curtain of the temple that I could find. Can you clarify or not? Yes, I will clarify that AI is not where I would do. Sorry, I get really grumpy about the AI thing, and it's only getting worse. So, yes, I will not argue with AI. Sorry, I'm getting very angry about this. I'm getting very tired of people. Not you, Katie. Not you, Katie. Katie, not you. Just, we need to stop this weird relationship with Bible scholarship and AI. It's very much irritating me. So the Zodiac, I mean, the main scholarship that came out of that came out of Notre Dame. I'll take Notre Dame out over AI. AI is going to have to get pretty darn good before I start letting AI undo scholarship out of like super respected institutions. Josephus, it's right out of Josephus. So Josephus, and you could argue that that is what Josephus is referencing. But AI is probably scraping that information from places and people that are uncomfortable with the Zodiac being referenced. But the Zodiac was so prominent in Jewish thought that when Josephus tells us that's what's on the curtain, that's what's on the curtain. So I'm going to take Josephus over AI. I'm going to take Notre Dame over AI. So you asked me to clarify. That's my clarification. If it felt like I was angry at you, Katie, I'm not angry at you. Not angry at you, Katie. I am getting very irritated with AI being the person I have to argue with. Only AI is not a person, which makes it a problem. Anyway, another question for episode 89. How does a star move? What was that all about? Well, if you said you were listening, and I think you said you were re-listening to episode 89. So in episode 89, we're talking about the sun. We're talking about the sun arising into a house. It's not a star moving over the house. It is a sun rising into the house of that's zodiac language. So the star that's moving is the sun. The zodiac is moving throughout the year. Lots of movement going on there. And again, we have a Greek Matthew rather than a Hebrew Matthew, what's being referenced, all that kind of stuff. They apparently followed a moving star. Could not these men have been descended from the Jewish people that remained in Babylon and not returned to Judah, which I believe was a fair number of them? That could have been. That's a possibility. Probably not the way they're described, but it's a possibility. But the way they're described, I would assume they're not. I would assume they're pagan outsiders. They know their text, but they did not have the scroll of Micah, perhaps, so they did not know about the Bethlehem thing. They wouldn't have read the Micah reference as a Bethlehem thing from the Messiah, like we would assume. We assume so much because of Jesus and Messianic prophecy. So you want to read that through their original lens. So they wouldn't have, not only would they not have probably had Micah as a reference point, maybe not, they would not have connected those ideas even if they did. So, okay. Are you guys aware of Black Sheep Talk? This is a YouTube comment from Debrief That. Black Sheep Talk by Scott, who has a YouTube series and wrote a book called Dynasty of Slaves, uncovering the archaeological record of Israel in Egypt. No, that's my rapid fire response there. I'm not aware of that. So there you go. That's an easy answer. Not aware of that. Blake, new listener, is way behind here. Was hoping just for a link or some clarification, since I can't find it in the show notes, probably a user error. In episode 85 about Mark's gospel, it's mentioned that Golgotha does not mean place of the skull, but place of the head. Can you provide a link to the source, as I'm having trouble finding one? Thanks. It's not user error on that, Blake. There's not necessarily a link to that. That's not a source. That's going to be a question of word study. And to be honest, when I re-record that reboot episode, I will probably not state that with as much vim and vigor. I will probably not state that as like heavy-handed as I did the first time around. That is going to be somewhat discussed and debated. My teacher, Ray, was very adamant when he taught that. He got very angry and said that is not what that means. And I understand the case that's being made there. Like if you look up that word, Golgotha, in any lexicon, it's going to tell you that it means skull. A deeper dive of how it's used, so it even goes beyond word study. It's not about citing a source. It's about studying the word usage. And again, we got Greek, we got Hebrew, we've got Aramaic. You got that whole conversation about what's being referenced. Is the usage of that word talking about the bone, the skull, the cranium bone, what we would know as the cranium, the skull, or is it talking about a head? Is it talking about head, not the bone at all, not the skull? Is it talking about head with flesh on it? That's what my teacher taught and had a reason for teaching that. It is very hard to make that case from word study alone. You're going to have to dig into what's being referenced, what's being said. What is the relationship between what the author is using that word for and head hill? in Rome, in the context of an ordination like in Mark, are we playing fast and loose with these terms or not? It's going to be a larger conversation. So it's not something you're just citing. It's a larger conversation about what is the author attempting to accomplish. So there you go. But not user error on that. And because that's so complicated, I will probably not state that with as heavy of hands. Oh, Bessie on Facebook says, can you explain the difference between the new creation and heaven? Oh, well, this doesn't belong in rapid fire response at all. Can I explain the difference between new creation and heaven? Let's say new creation, because there's all kinds of themes of new creation. I think what you may be referring to is like a new heavens, new earth, new creation, because there's all kinds of like new creation. Like there's the idea of just a new creation, not a physical heavenly new creation, but just like we're a new creation, we're born again, or the idea of creation being renewed or reformed, or the end of the Gospel of John, where we're back in the garden again with new creation. But then there's like the new heavens, new earth, new creation. So if we were talking about new heavens, new earth creation, the scriptures do connect those ideas of heaven, and heaven as at least in the New Testament Greek construct of heaven that we're speaking of, because like in the Hebrew, heaven is usually heavens. It refers to the heavens. It could be anything from the sky to what lies beyond the sky, to where the planets reside, to where God sits on his throne, the heavens plural. It's not really heaven like we think about it when we say heaven. You said new creation in heaven, right? So the Hebraic concept of heavens, just their cosmology doesn't work anything like ours does. But when you start talking about like Revelation, and I saw heaven coming down out of heaven, I saw heaven coming down, adorned as a bride. That heaven seems to be connected with, if not interchangeable to, and not all the time, but many biblical authors, it seems, would tie and interchange those ideas of the new heavens, new earth, and the new creation, new heavens, new earth, and what we might think of when we think of heaven. There is this fantastic video about on the Bible Project. Bible Project has this great video. It's one of their first original videos, if I remember right. One of their very first videos about heaven and hell. And it's like a Venn diagram. And heaven and hell are supposed to, it's not heaven and hell. I am so sorry. Heaven and earth. Heaven and earth. And heaven and earth are supposed to overlap perfectly like an eclipse. But the, whatever you want to call it, the fall, distortion, rebellion, causes these things to get like pulled apart. And the scripture talks about them coming back together. And that new world, that new earth, that new creation is that new heavens and new earth, or a renewed heavens and a renewed earth. You can debate whether or not that's the right kind of idea or the right kind of image or not, but that same concept, Bessie. So great question. Could talk about that for 20 more minutes. Heidi says, do you have any insights into binding and loosing? Jesus talks about it in Matthew 18:18. I think it's referred to in his previous words about dealing with a brother who is, we will talk about this in session 4, Heidi, just so you know. I think it's referring to his previous words about dealing with a brother who is in sin, but binding and loosing has been made into an entire doctrine about how to pray by binding the devil and loosing blessings. Oh yeah, not that, Heidi. That would not be the Jewish apostolic. That would not be what Jesus or Peter or the disciples understood at all. And that's not to say anything about that version of Christianity or that corner of Pentecostalism or anything. I don't have anything, I'm not throwing shade at that, but that would not be at all what they understand about binding and loosing. Binding and loosing was a communal act. We'll talk about it in session 4 of the podcast when we go through the book of Acts. Binding and loosing is what the community does when walking out God's word meets this really complicated, well, wait a minute. What are we going to do here as a community of God's people? And it might be a local community, it might be a larger community, but the community of God, like, we're walking out Torah, we're walking out obedience, we're walking out the gospel, whatever context we're in, we're walking out the gospel, and now we bump up against, oh no, what does the gospel require of us? What do we need to do to fulfill God's desire in the world? We don't know. Does God want us to go right, or does God want us to go left? And if it's straightforward, that's great. We don't need to bind and loose. It's straightforward. Here's the answer, full speed ahead. But sometimes it's not straightforward, and we don't know, and it's not clear. And so the community comes together, and they deliberate, and they pray. The Jerusalem Council, Acts 15, is a binding and loosing. That's where it shows up in our conversation in the podcast. The Jerusalem Council is an act of binding and loosing. The community comes together and says, do the Gentiles have to follow Torah? What is the relationship? Is there any relationship between the Gentile convert and Torah observance? And they come out of Jerusalem Council essentially saying, no, there's no relationship. That was an act of binding. We're going to come together and figure out, what does the gospel demand of us? How are we going to walk that out? And they make that decision, and they either bind it up, they say you can't do it, or they loose it and they say there's no restriction. And so that's the binding and loosing. It's a communal decision, and the people of God believe that God comes alongside of that and says, okay, if that's your decision, then we'll make that together, but I'm going to hold you to that decision. So you can't make that decision and then not live by it. If that's the decision you're going to make, we're going to live by that decision. If you're going to loose it, we'll loose it. If we're going to bind it, we'll bind it. But I'm going to hold you to the decision that you make together as a community. That's binding and loosing. So, but not the binding and loosing blessings and binding the devil and all the deliverance stuff. Not that. That might fit in another context. I'm not making comment on that, but not relevant to the binding and loosing conversation. YouTube comment. Do you think? Oh, no, not do you think. Thank you. Don't know why I read do you think. Hi, Marty. Thank you and the team for all the work you do. My question is, what are your thoughts about if everyone has a specific call from God vocationally? This is such a good question and so hard to answer straightforward. Because on one hand, the answer to me is no. I don't think every single person has a call from God. In fact, I would vocationally, I think is what you're asking. Does everyone have a vocational call on their life? And the answer to that is no. In fact, I would think that very few people, I would think it would be the rare occasion, like Samuel or Samson, where God shows up and says, I have a special job for you. I would say that's the exception to the rule, that there's not a particular vocational call that is yours and yours alone, and everyone has one and their job is to find it. I don't think that. Now, if vocation means more than just situational work, if what we mean by that is who you are and how you're made to show up in the world, if your vocation is not about where you get your paycheck on Thursday, but about like how you're wired, your Enneagram, your Strengths Finder, your Myers-Briggs, your whatever, like, I'm just this kind of a person. I have this kind of a temperament. I have these spiritual gifts. I am designed this way and I show up this way in the world. If that's what we're talking about, I'm going to start drifting more towards yes than no. But if somebody wants, I use the word call a lot. A younger version of me use what is God has a call on your life. What is God calling you to do? Call it. And I had somebody very appropriately confront me and say, Marty, calling is something that a very privileged group of people have the opportunity to engage, where a lot of people not in the country that you live in, or not with your particular subcultural context, they don't get that luxury. They don't wake up every day going like, what is God's call on? They wake up every day trying to survive. And there was a much more larger, robust conversation on that. And I deeply, deeply, deeply appreciated that perspective. And it changed the way that I used the word calling and talked about calling. Do I believe we have a purpose, like that we're designed a particular way, that our humanity matters, that we're placed here to be a particular kind of? Absolutely. But do I believe that we have a vocational calling on our life, and it's like it's like a treasure hunt to figure out what I'm supposed to do. No, I don't. So I don't know if that's helpful. There you go. Allison from Instagram says, when Paul spoke in the synagogue at Pisidian Antioch, why were God-fearing Gentiles present at the synagogue? Great question. You should come to Turkey and we should talk about it. We will also talk about this in session 4, by the way, Allison. We'll do this really in depth. We'll spend a lot of time here on this. But they're present in the Pisidian Antioch synagogue because in the biblical world of Asia and Asia Minor, Hillel Judaism took up residence within the Roman context. And what that meant was as Judaism was lived with it, Pisidian Antioch was a miniature Rome. It was a miniature Rome in the Roman Empire. It is as Roman as it gets. It's not a Jewish that has some Romans in it. It's not like kind of Roman. It is like literally as Roman as you could be. There is no Greek influence in Pisidian Antioch. It is completely Roman. It is a Roman colony planted to spread Rome, Roman culture, Rome. So what kind of Jews do you have there? You don't have separatist, Shammai, I'm trying to keep my holy. I have Jews that are comfortable living in a Roman context. What that means is all these Gentiles end up bumping up against the God of Israel and Jewish worship. And when you fall in love with the God of Israel and you're a Gentile, then you have, this happens, this isn't unique to Pisidian. This would have happened literally everywhere in your New Testament. Everywhere that Paul went, he would have showed up at a synagogue. And I can almost guarantee you, at every single synagogue he showed up to in the New Testament, there were Theosebes there. There were Gentiles who loved the God of Israel. They weren't Jewish. They didn't eat kosher. They didn't wear tassels. They didn't, take on kosher living, but they loved and worshiped the God of Israel. And that would have been everywhere that Paul went. And so that's what you see in Pisidian Antioch, which does not surprise us, because you're going to have a very Hillel, Greco-Roman world. Hillel believed that God wanted to redeem the Roman world. And so Hillel said, we need to go live in their cities. We need to go to their gymnasiums for our education. We need to be involved in Greco-Roman culture so that God can reach a Greco-Roman world with Torah. With the order and the shalom and the justice of Torah. And so Hillel very deliberately went to spread that to the Greco-Roman world. Oh, Instagram. Do you think that Solomon's Proverbs were written as a guide to Jesus, to how to live, and God's advice to him to be righteous? Whoo! Okay. My immediate answer is no. But then it gets interesting, right? So no, I don't think that's why Proverbs were written. But there is a lot of discussion about the relationships between Jesus and Sophia, which is wisdom. In Proverbs, wisdom is depicted as, like, there are these two women in Proverbs. There's Sophia, the beautiful woman of wisdom, that calls you to something good and holy and pure. And then there's the adulteress. And people think it's just about adultery. No. The adulteress is everything that is not wisdom. The adulteress is folly. The adulteress is human desire not held correctly. So you have wisdom and folly depicted as these two women, right? So Sophia ends up being this personification of wisdom. And there is a huge discussion in scholarship about Jesus's relationship to Sophia and wisdom. Paul says that Jesus is Sophia, is that wisdom incarnate. So is there a relationship between Jesus and Proverbs? Or should I say Jesus and wisdom depicted in Proverbs, Jesus as wisdom spoken about in the Proverbs? I'm all there. Do I think Proverbs were written for Jesus? No. But do I think there's an in-depth relationship between Jesus and wisdom, ergo Proverbs? Yes. And that's juicy. It's a juicy little question. I like that. Okay. Whew, we're done. Rapid fire response to that question, music.
Rapid fire responses.
Well then.
Well, then. See, when we interact with a live audience, you just have no idea what's coming. It's so much fun.
I did think about saving that new creation and heaven question for outside, but like we still had 20 minutes left in rapid fire, and I was panicking that we weren't going to have enough stuff to talk about, so I just threw it in there.
Well, we made it. And this is the section, everybody, right in the middle of our live streams, where we do the same thing every time. And every time we say, we know we're doing the same thing, but it's not just a passing gesture. We stop every single time on purpose because we want to take time to say thank you to everybody that supports our ministry, to everybody that gives. A lot of people give in a lot of different ways. And a lot of people are out there giving $10 a month, $15 a month, $20 a month, and it makes a huge difference. I know that the amount of that gift doesn't feel like it makes a huge difference, but there are so many people doing it that it powers. I mean, we have just over a $4 million budget over here at Impact and Bema, and you would not believe the amount of that budget that's powered by small little gifts. And that feels like a lot of money, but what that represents is a lot of people. We spend most of our money on just compensating people, putting good people to work, doing good, beautiful things. So you're paying for somebody to be able to do the production or the content creation. We just hired a new team member, Bree Rapp, who's going to be doing our media arts coordinator. So she's going to be making all the awesome videos and graphics that Burr will share on social media. And that's the stuff that when you see that stuff, and of course it's a passing like, oh, that's a cool graphic. And like any other graphic that you see, but behind that is somebody, we're not using AI, Jang Nabbit, to do our graphics. Like we're paying somebody to do that, and we're able to do that because a lot of you give. And what's crazy is it's still the smallest fraction of the people that listen to our podcast. It's like it's well below 10% of the people that listen to our podcast give, and which is okay. That's not a guilt trip. That's me just saying it matters. And can you imagine what happens with $10 a month when enough people give that to our ministry? So it matters, and we care. And then there's people that, like, they just drop a $5,000 check because they just got paid for their business, and that's awesome too. So for all of you that do it in so many beautiful ways, we say thank you. And the fact that Bree's on our team, we say thank you. And that's real stuff, real people, real stories, real names, because people give real gifts. So thanks, everyone. You make a difference.
It's beautiful.
What else you got, Brett?
I have a couple of related questions as far as reboot stuff. Tammy says, good afternoon from North Carolina. So we got North Carolina now. How do I know if I'm listening to a new or older podcast? And then Chris was asking, we've started going back through session 1 with the new episodes, but is there still a way to access the old episodes? Not that we don't enjoy the new episodes, but it seems that now each section of scripture discussed is different than the previous version, and we would like to reference some of the older content. They should not be different sections of scripture. Each episode that we are rebooting is covering the exact same passages. More or less. There might be some slight details of like, oh, we're bringing this extra little, like we found a reference to this thing. I think we're going to get more of that maybe in session 3, where we've got some new remezim that we found, or whatever. But whatever. Generally, the flow of the episodes is the same as it was before. So if you're feeling like it's different, I'm not sure what you're looking at, Chris. You might be on a pirate anti-Bema accidental, I don't know, something's up if you're getting completely different passages from the old episodes. How do you know if you're listening to the new or the old? I would say probably the best way, if you're in the middle of the episode, is my voice is completely different, because I did not have the right equipment and I could not accurately reproduce my voice through the microphones that we had. And so that's a pretty good indicator. But you'll have different music. You'll have, Marty's voice is probably a little different. We're in different recording environments, so you should be able to tell. But how do you get to them? They're in the show notes. The link is there. You can just get a direct access to the MP3 Marty's trying to share his screen, but we
Yeah,
just got
I'm gonna show
we
everyone.
we just have a double Marty down in the corner here.
Let me share my screen, Brent. Give me the power.
I don't know. I don't know
Gimme.
why. I think I
Gimme.
just have to switch over to. Hold on.
Gimme. Let me share my screen. Everybody asked about this, so I'm going to show you. We're going to show. Brent, I can't hear you. You went away. So if you're trying to
I was sorry. Stop it and start it again, and I think it'll pop up.
I'm going to stop. I'm going to start it again, everyone. Share.
Here we go.
Bam. Look down here, everyone. If you're looking at a reboot episode, this is what. First of all, for all of you that are trying to find your show notes, this is the website. All this stuff is your show notes down here, and this will be down in your podcast player. You might have to swipe to the side. You might just have to swipe down, but these are your show notes. If you're a reboot episode, right down here, you're going to have legacy content. Ooh, that tells you this is a reboot episode. I don't know if let's go. Let me switch. Let's do this. Let's go to Written in the Stars. This is not a reboot episode. You'll notice there's no companion study materials. There's no legacy content. That's the other way to tell whether it's a reboot episode. The dates are not a good way to tell because the dates don't change so that your podcast timeline stays the same. But this is a reboot. There are study tools and legacy episode. How do you get to the old stuff? Right there. That's how you get to the old stuff. Right down there. Legacy content. Written in the Stars. It's not there because it's not a reboot episode. How did I do, Brent? How did I do?
Pretty good, I guess.
Shoot. So good.
Smindle 4.0 says sometimes we like the way you explain things in the older episodes. Yeah. We get that. That's why we make it available.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not trying to hide it. We want them to be accessible. We're not also making it super easy either. But we are not trying to make those old episodes go away or hide anything. You'll always be able to go back and listen to the old stuff. But for the most part, we believe the newer arc is an improvement for any host of reasons.
Reed and Marty and I were wrestling with this a little bit on a recent episode, talking about nostalgia and like what is the draw? Because it's like, we hope that what we're doing is better in every way. And the reality is sometimes we just might phrase it a little bit differently and it doesn't hit for you the same way that the other one did.
Yep.
And so that's why it's there.
Yep.
So Nathan, though, was asking, last year I worked through sessions 1 through 5 before taking a trip to Israel. I'm wanting to re-engage with the content. Do you suggest continuing on with session 6 or starting over with session 1? And I mean, I guess I don't know what your Israel experience was like, Nathan. So that could potentially be a factor. But I would say go on to session 6 because there's just so much good stuff ahead of you, Nathan.
Yeah, I would say go on, and I would say what Brent always says, which is binge it. Like put it on 2x speed if you need to. Listen to it while you're cleaning. You'll find the parts of the podcast you're like, I'm going to go back to that. But not all of the new content will be that. And season 6 is a long little journey. I call it podcast puberty. Like we're trying to figure out who we are at Bema. Like our podcast voice is cracking and it's kind of awkward and we don't really know how to stand. But we figure it out over the course of time. We go through John verse by verse in season 6.
Well,
so
and that's one of the
not this whole there's some beautiful stuff there.
Yeah, verse by verse through John. Like I definitely pushed for that. I don't know exactly what was the straw that broke the camel's back to get you to agree to do that, Marty, but I definitely wanted that. And God just kind of orchestrated like a lot of threads of things that we were doing all together at the same time. Like when we were in the John 3, 4, 5 portion of the John series, we were also talking about episodes of The Chosen that covered that period of time. And we were also interviewing Kevin Chandler about some of those experiences. And we had him on one of our John episodes, but also his interview. And so all of those episodes are playing together. Yeah. So I know some of you don't watch The Chosen. I think you could probably just listen to the episodes anyway, and you'll just hear us talk about the text more. So,
or skip those. Those are easy to skip.
Or skip it. Yeah, skip around. It doesn't matter. Like just don't ignore everything past session 5, because there's definitely something there for you. I was just talking to some people at our live episode recording a couple weeks ago. They're like, yeah, I didn't really like the interviews, but then I actually started listening to them, and I found some incredible people who I have read their books now. And so there's something there for you. I guarantee it. I don't know what it is. It's probably not going to be everything, but there's something good ahead.
Yep, 100%.
I also pulled apart a bunch of comments because so first one was from Vanessa. Why is Brent live from the boiler room? And Vanessa is more right than she might even know, because I do have boiler. Where's my hand here? This one here. So this is my water heater right here on the edge of the screen. But back behind that, in the real darkness, I have boiler heating. I have moved to Spokane, Washington. That is why. And so I am in the basement as I was before, but this is an unfinished basement, and the other one was a little more finished. So that is why I'm live from the boiler room.
Live from the boiler room. I love that.
Okay, so I'm going to run through a bunch of things that you made a comment that people don't need to specifically send in stuff, but a bunch of people send in nice things. So Foster was saying, yay, I actually caught the live Q&A, so glad you're here, Foster. Pamela said, thanks for all you do. You've opened my eyes to so many things. Yeah. Me too, Pamela. I understand that experience. Instagram, Farubo, I think. I'm just going to pronounce it that way. Says, I love Bama. Your podcast taught me the love God is when I had only thought of God as a benevolent ruler. I love you guys. I owe my whole life to your willingness to teach. I would love to have your support to start a Bama group in South Africa and Southern African countries. Please email me, Farubo, or use the contact page on the Bama website, or DM me on Instagram. I don't care. We'll get connected somehow. We'll get you on the map. We'll give you all of our resources for groups. We'd love to do that. ALE says, I love your podcast to show me the love of God and the love God has for his people. Please come to Arizona. I assume that's for you, Marty, but I'll come to Arizona too, maybe.
Hey, listen, their name, ALE, spells ale, which I can be a fan of if it's produced well. So
I don't know. I don't know that's, I feel like it's initials, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
I feel like I am game to find out. So there you go.
Okay. See you in Arizona then.
See you in Arizona.
Beth said, I got to episode 199 and quit due to a questionable relationship. I broke covenant, asked forgiveness, and now blessed to be back on board with Bama. I don't necessarily know what that part of the question means, but Beth says she's reading the Gospel of Being Human and puts a heart. So thank you. I got one of my copies right here.
There you go.
Marty loves being human, I've heard.
I do. I love it.
Maria Fingerly says, hi, y'all, with a cowboy hat emoji.
Oh, hi, y'all. Hi, Maria.
Imeiru says, thank you for creating Bema. It has allowed me to re-examine the Bible with a new perspective and understanding. Bessie says, thank you for your podcast. Super grateful for you guys, your partnership with the Lord. My son and I are benefiting from your obedience, and it's a gift to many, so thank you. And Mark S. says, good afternoon, new listener, enjoying the podcast. Church of Christ raised. And we were not Church of Christ raised, but we are in a tradition that belongs with the Church of Christ. The Restoration.
We are now.
So, yep, we're there.
Yep. I suppose after being there for 30, I suppose after being there for like 25 years, I should probably consider that they have raised quite a bit of me.
That's true. That's true. So much of your growth happened in that context.
Yeah.
All right. Me too.
All right.
Me too. That's, people said lots of nice things. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. We love doing what we're doing, and we love that you are enjoying it and joining us on the journey and everything else. So
absolutely. All right, guys. Well, you can keep live questions coming. I got 4 left in the parking lot. I got 4 parking lot questions left. So,
oh dear.
Here we are. We're diving back in. All right. Dan says, thank you for your podcast 239 with Reed Dent on deconstruction. It was a comment made by Reed that maybe people are just angry and that we should have sympathy for them because we might have touched something related to their anger. I would argue that sometimes people are traumatized by what has happened in the church. by what is preached or pushed or done, not in the name of Jesus, but in the name of a church structure. So they are hurt and traumatized. And on top of that, churches often have an incredibly hard time of changing or listening or letting the dialogue happen. And then we turn around and say you're just hurt, or you're just angry at something, and it only embitters the anger. So I have an issue with that comment, but I do appreciate the podcast. Feel free to write back. Yeah, Dan, I think both of those things can be true. I think it's also possible. What you said is absolutely possible, and there's nothing on that episode that we were saying that undoes any of that. In fact, I think most of everything we talked about went really alongside of exactly what you're saying. People have been hurt. People have been traumatized. But it's also true, and that's probably even most of the time. Dan, I think you're saying like, well, sometimes. I think often it's most of the time what you said is right. But I think Reed's comment is also true. Both things can be true at the same time. There are also people that are just angry. And sometimes it is because they've been traumatized, 100%. And sometimes anger has a different place than it does for the traumatized, hurt person. So we were not saying everybody was angry. Like you quoted it. Maybe people are just angry. Maybe people are just angry. Sometimes there are some people that maybe are angry. Like that is one of the myriad of options of why people are in the midst of deconstruction. It is not the only reason why people are, just like trauma is not the only reason that people deconstruct. I would argue it's a major reason that people deconstruct. I'm with you, Dan. Like I'm 100% with you. But there's a lot of reasons that people are in those spaces. And sometimes, and I think what Reed was saying we should have sympathy for those people. And he's not talking about the ones you're talking about. He's not talking about the traumatized ones, the hurt ones, the embattled ones. Like he's talking about a different set of people that should still receive our sympathy, Dan. Still. There are the people that are traumatized. That's a different group of people. But even if all you were is angry, Reed's saying they should still receive our sympathy, even if that is who they were or where they were at. So I'm with you. And I think Reed was totally with you. And don't smush the two together and make them, don't make yourself pick either or. Both those things can be true at the same time. And it's important to have sympathy and empathy for all the above. It doesn't matter, like, because think about if what Reed says isn't true, then that means the only people that deserve our empathy are people that are traumatized. So if I can somehow prove that you weren't traumatized or that's not why, well, then you don't deserve my empathy. But that is, but they do. Even if all they are is angry, they also deserve our empathy. So those are things that I would say to that. I'm with you. I think Reed is with you. Totally 100%. So, all right. Brent thinks maybe he's found a couple comments that were in a follow-up to the earlier questions about Jews and God-fearers. Stacy says, were the Jewish believers in Antioch influenced by Hillel's or Shammai's teachings? Yes. And again, we'll go through this very much in depth in season 4, everyone. So without the context, it's really hard to like nail everything down like this. But if you're in Pisidian Antioch, it has to be Hillel because it's so Roman. That was my point. You cannot be Shammai and be in Pisidian Antioch. You can't be. Like literally everything you touch would make you unclean. You can't be involved in anything. Pisidian Antioch is like, it's like I'm trying to think of a good example. It's like if there was a mini Washington, D.C. Like consider Washington, D.C., but make it a smaller city and make it even less, like make it even more politically. That's Pisidian Antioch. So you can't be Shammai and live there. You have to be Hillel. So now Pisidian Antioch is planted there because, listen to this, because it sits on the edge of the region of Galatia. And they're trying to impact Galatia because Galatia is not Roman. Galatia is very tribal. They refuse the Hellenization of the Greco-Roman culture. So they're planting Pisidian Antioch to bring Roman culture to the region of Galatia. So just outside of Pisidian Antioch sits on the edge of Galatia. Galatia is pure Shammai for the very reasons I just articulated. Because Shammai, you went to Galatia to get away from the Greco-Roman culture. The synagogues in Galatia are pure Shammai. We have 6 quotes from Galatian rabbis in the Talmud. All of them are Shammai quotes. There is no exception. So all of them are, so Shammai in Galatia, but Hillel and Pisidian Antioch, because of what Pisidian Antioch is, even as it sits on the edge of a region that is Shammai. So much fun. Okay. And then Kai says, I'm wondering if you have heard Jamie Winship and done the identity exchange. Remember how I was talking about Kingsport, Tennessee, and how much fun it is? Part of the reason why it's so much fun is that's where Jamie Winship is. Is that a secret? Maybe I'm not supposed to tell people that. I don't know. But that's where I get to hang out with Jamie. I've hung out with him a couple times now. This last trip, I got to hang out some together. I have not actually done the identity exchange. I'm very familiar with his material. Very familiar with how super helpful it's been. The last time I hung out with him, there was a couple members of his team there. They were talking about all that. I kept making the mistake of asking them, so what do you do? To which they would just smile at me because that was the wrong question to ask them because of the identity exchange. So I think it's really good. And Brent is highlighting, I think it's really beautiful and awesome way to hear who God calls you to be. I see. Yeah, and that could be reference to the call. Let's connect that to our earlier question about, is there a vocational call on everyone's life? And I said no, unless we're talking about our design. This is a great connection to that. If I'm saying your name right, Kai, that connection, spot on. This would be a great example of somebody saying, okay, there is a call on who you are. Like, your identity is supposed to take up space in the world. You're supposed to be you in the world and to be the right version of you. So if that's what we're talking about, I'm all on board. So yeah, great contribution. If that's what you're referencing, Kai, earlier, that's great. Okay. Brian says the end of Judges, chapters 19 through 21, start with the idea that there is no king in Israel. It tells the awful Sodom and Gomorrah like story of a concubine of a Levite from Bethlehem who is assaulted to death by the men of Gibeah. Tribe of Benjamin, followed by the horrific way wives were provided so Benjamin could survive as a tribe. This is followed in 1st and 2nd Samuel by the first king coming from Gibeah from the tribe of Benjamin, and God's choice of a king coming from Bethlehem. It seems like there is an obvious, almost screaming out parallel here, but what are we supposed to make of it? It seems like there might be something different than the obvious surface level parallel. I think, I don't know how far you've listened, Brian. I think this is exactly what I'm trying to get at in session 2 when I talk about a donkey herder or Saul and David, donkey herder or shepherd, Benjamin or Judah. Like, I make that point over and over again. And maybe I don't connect it to what you're pointing out here, but my brain is. When I say Saul's coming from the tribe of Benjamin, on the podcast we talk about, and the tribe of Benjamin is not looking good right now at this point in history. The tribe of Benjamin is not something you put on your chest and brag about by wearing their jersey. The tribe of Benjamin people are not happy with the tribe of Benjamin at that point in the story. So when God gives you a donkey herder from the tribe of Benjamin as your king, he is, the rabbi said, this isn't Marty, the rabbi said he is definitely making a statement about the kind of people you're being and the kind of king you're asking for. And then when God chooses his own king, he does the opposite. I'm going to give you a shepherd. He's going to be from Judah. He's going to be the bottom of the pecking order because that's the kind of king I want you to have. And you've all forgotten that. So I think everything you've noted is spot on, Brian. I think you're spot on. I love where your head is at. That is exactly what I think. So love it. Instagram comment Seen lots on spiritual warfare lately. Disclaimer: I have zero interest in dabbling with the occult, asking from ignorance. Curious what the text says, what an Eastern view yields, and how to better represent Christ in all circumstances. I simply don't understand as believers what our place is in this. Seen so much lately about Christians dealing with demonic experience, examples like some names I don't know about and stuff. So your algorithm is different than mine. I don't know your name. Rockin' for him 97. I'm not seeing it. So part of that, before I even get in with the rest of your question, there's good reason to pause just long enough to go. We have to be aware of how the world that we live in with information, internet, social media shapes what we perceive as reality. Because what you're clicking into, what you're watching multiple times, the algorithm is going, oh, you want more of that? Here's some more. Oh, here's some more. Even when you don't like it, even when you hate the thing you're watching, if you're clicking it, the algorithm's going more of the thing they're clicking on. Like, it's so hard for me to train my algorithm because I want to click on the stuff that rage baits me, and I have to like scroll past it. I don't want to look at that. I'm telling my algorithm, don't want that, don't want that, don't want that. Sometimes I can literally tell my algorithm, I don't want to see this. So we all of us, not just you, Rockin' for him 97, not you, all of us have to be aware of like how the information world like shapes our reality, because it does in some really, really big ways. Because I'm not seeing any of those things, like zero. I'm seeing none of it. Doesn't mean it's right or it's wrong. It just means what you feel like you're seeing all around you. Me, one state over, I could even be living right next door, not seeing it. I'm seeing zero of it. So how much study of our enemy until it becomes a dark obsession? Yeah, it's a great question. I have European friends who seem sometimes to blend a Celtic practice with Christian doctrine. How much energy should we spend knowing our enemy as believers? Verses that make me insecure, give some proof text verses. I don't mean that in a negative way. Instances that make me feel insecure in this area. Again, some name that I don't even know what that name is. Means that we are vulnerable to demonic attack. Or pastors believe. Yeah, I can't consume this stuff. Rockin' for him 97. This is not stuff that we're told that the gates of hell will not prevail. What that means is survive, which means the gates of hell are being attacked. The gates of hell are not coming after us. We come after them. Like we serve the one that makes the demons shudder. Like, I'm just not going to spend my time trying to like figure out the satanic, the demonic, I'm not going to spend it. And I know that some people do, and they're called to deliverance ministry or what. That's fine. I'm not going to argue with that. If that's you, that's fine. That I am not the guy to ask, because that is not where I live. There are things in Scripture, like there are reminders that our battle is not against flesh and blood, because we tend to think it is. We tend to think that those people are no. All people are people. All people are beloved. People are my brothers and sisters. I don't care how much of an enemy they are. People are people. People are kids in God's family. So my war is never against people, not even that one, not even him. Nope, my war is not against him or them or that group or that political party. That's not who my war is against, because those people are people. My war is against transcendent things. And yes, powers, heavenly powers. You could talk about principalities, demons, angels, all that kind of, but you can get really wound up in that stuff and forget that the world we live in, the place where we're supposed to be fighting those. So in Romans 16, God says that the God of peace will soon crush Satan underneath your feet, right? There is a rabbinic passage in Genesis. We're told in Genesis 3, we're told that the serpent will strike, that Eve will have descendants, that Eve will have, what am I trying to say? Eve will have a lineage. And the serpent, make it Satan if you want to, I don't care, is going to strike the heel of these descendants. But those descendants are going to deal a crushing death blow, is what the Hebrew says, to the serpent's head. And the rabbi said, oh, well, I'll tell you how that happens. All we do is walk in faithfulness. That is our call. We walk in faithfulness. We walk faithfully to the way of God, faithfully in Torah, faithfully on the path that God calls us to. And when the serpent strikes, oh, it strikes. The problem is we're walking. And as we walk, that heel comes down. Every step of faithfulness, that heel comes down. And so when that snake strikes at your heel, that snake dies because you're walking in faithfulness. And Paul references this midrash when he says the God of peace will soon crush Satan underneath your feet, not his feet, not Jesus's feet. The God of peace will soon crush Satan underneath your feet because you walk in faithfulness to the gospel. And as you walk, you crush Satan. I don't have to be worried about what Satan is up to. I have to walk in faithfulness because our walking in faithfulness will crush the works of Satan. Or if we need Tolkien's quote, which I don't even think was in the books, but was in the movie, go to that Gandalf scene where he's talking to Lady, whatever her name is. And he's like, I think it's the small deeds of small, ordinary people that actually put out the work of darkness. Yeah, baby. So that's just not where I live. I just don't live in that space where I'm like, oh, the demonic. And oh my God. Nope. Nope. Jesus is sleeping in a boat. That's how he feels about the demonic. He's napping in a boat. While we're all concerned, like we're all convinced we're going to die in a storm of demonic activity. And Jesus is like, he gets up and he's like, be quiet, shut up. And the waves die. That's how God feels. So I'm just not going to, I'm not talking about your question. Your question's great. I can feel the angst of living in that space. I'm not talking about your question. I'm talking about like, I'm not going to spend my time. I'm going to spend my time in resurrection, hope, faithfulness, generosity, goodness, love for the outsider. That's what I'm going to do. You know what Satan's going to do? He's going to tremble when I do that. Tremble, because the gates of hell cannot stand against that. But I'll tell you what, if I sit here all day going like, oh, what's coming out of the gates of hell? I'm like, nah. All that stuff gets thrown in a lake of fire at the end of the story. And it's not even a fair fight. Like the whole book of Revelation, like the whole thing is like, here it comes. And the bell goes off and Jesus is like, dunk. New heavens, new earth. Let's go. Yeah. All right. I don't know who this question is from because Brian Trushinger didn't give me a name. Thanks a lot, Brian. I don't know where this question came from. I don't know who they are because you gave me nothing. Okay. They have 3 questions about Matthew 5:17 through 18. Finish my book, Asking Better Questions of the Bible. Probably one of the best, most intriguing and inspiring books I've ever read. Wow. Heavy praise, whoever you are, nameless person. But thank you very much. It's very encouraging. I appreciate that so very much. Back to Matthew 5:18, question 1. Okay, the verses under, let's go find the verses under discussion here. The verses under discussion are, for truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter. Okay, sorry, let me back up. 17 and 18. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Question number 1 from this question asker. The verse is often used to say that not one word out of the Bible will be lost. But there are so many different translations of the Bible, some of them missing verses, and other translations have. Also, Jesus at this time cannot be speaking of the entire 66th book of the Bible that we have today because they didn't even have that Bible. So that reading of the verse is bothering me. The question would be, what did Jesus mean by one jot or tittle of the law? There's a lot of great questions in that one question. Number 1, Jesus did have a Bible. It is not the Bible that we have arranged in the order that we have with the New Testament. You are correct. The New Testament was not existent then. But they did have Torah, and they did have Nevi'im. They did have scriptures. They even had writings that were being canonized. They were in the process of being canonized as Jesus is doing his ministry. So when he talks about the law, he's talking about Torah at the very least. He may even be referencing prophets. We could have a pretty good argument about that. But he's at least referencing the books of Moses and Torah. When he says No, he says the prophets. He says the prophets. Do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. So if you're reading, you said you read Asking Better Questions of the Bible, question asker. Chapter 5 of that book, I talk about Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. So he references directly in here Torah and Nevi'im. He says, not one, I have not come to abolish law or the prophets. That's Torah and Nevi'im. Okay? So he's talking about that. He is not talking about your New Testament, and he does not reference directly the Ketuvim. They haven't actually been put together yet. About different translations, yeah, the work of translation. He's definitely not talking about translations. That's for sure. He's talking about the Hebrew Scriptures. The translation is the work that we do. When you talk about translations missing verses, I get worried that you have seen too many Facebook memes, because that's really not as scandalous as it's been made out to sound. Here's the deal. When we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, we found earlier manuscripts. And not just the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have found earlier manuscripts. And what we found in the earliest manuscripts is a lot of those verses were not there. So when you have the best evidence, you then adjust your translations accordingly. So we have better evidence. And it's a handful of verses. It's not happening every chapter. We're not missing 40 billion verses. Your Bible's not changing radically. A great example is John chapter 5. I think it's missing verse 4, because we've gotten far better evidence about John's original manuscript, and that verse was not in there originally. So we took it out, because we should, because that verse wasn't in there. So that's why those translations are missing. They're not getting rid of verses. They're getting rid of verses that shouldn't have been there in the first place. So, and that's just the work of translation. That's just good translation being done well, or bad translation being done poorly. But that's just the work of translation. So nothing to see there. That's all good. Question 2. If Jesus says here in Matthew 5:18 that he has come to fulfill the law, not destroy it, then in John 19:30, when Jesus is on the cross, he says it's finished right before he dies. And here in Matthew 5:18, he says, till it all be fulfilled. So if Jesus said that he came not to destroy, but to fulfill, and then he said it is finished, does that mean now he has done what he came to do and fulfill the law? And you also asked about jots and tittles, by the way. Jots and tittles is a reference to yods and dogashes. There's a dogash, and there's like little dots. Think of it like the same kind of things that will end up being cantation marks later in the Masorite text, but there are little yods and dogashes, jots and tittles. So it's saying like the little minutest parts of the law remain, right? Now, what you're doing in your second question is you're mixing a reference from Matthew 5 to another biblical author, and those things aren't trying to talk to each other, right? John 19 isn't having a conversation with Matthew 5. And we got to be really careful that we don't like make those things into like this seamless dialogue and conversation, because John's having a different conversation than Matthew is having. Having said that, the answers to your questions, let's see here. Does he mean now he has done what he came to do and fulfill the law? I mean, on one hand, yes, because to fulfill the law in the Jewish world means to walk out Torah correctly. Jesus has, throughout his entire ministry and now his death and resurrection, he has walked out Torah completely. John 13 says, knowing that he had finished what he had been sent to do. So your Bible does say that Jesus at the end of his ministry had finished what he had been sent to do. That's in John 13, by the way. He has not gone to the cross yet, which, by the way, means a couple things. Number one, there is still more that he's going to accomplish on the cross. Hello. But also, he was sent here to do far more than just die on the cross. So the answer is yes, but what we're trying to do often, a lot of us, not just you, oh question asker, who I don't know your name, but what you're trying to do in this question is you're trying to make something work, uniform, cleanly and succinctly. You want it to work mechanically. You want it to, like, almost in this transactional, like A plus B equals C. And the Bible's just not doing that work for us. So when we force the Bible into those categories, it doesn't work right. And you're feeling that, and you're wanting it to work right. So you're trying to figure out, if I hold it this way, will it work? If I hold it this way, will it work? If I think of it this way, is that what it means? And the answer is no. The answer is no. The Bible's having a wider, more dynamic, more robust conversation. It's saying, come follow Jesus. It's not saying, let me give you a perfect theology that works all cleanly. It's saying, Matthew is saying, come follow Jesus. Mark and Luke, and then John later is saying, come follow Jesus. But they're having like different, Matthew's having one conversation that says, come follow Jesus. And John isn't having a conversation about Matthew. He's having a different conversation that he's saying, come follow Jesus. And you're trying to get them to talk to each other. But the problem is they're not talking to each other, if that makes any sense. That's a good hermeneutical question, but tricky. Question number 3. I noticed also in 5:18, it says, till heaven and earth pass, and till all be fulfilled. Those two seem like very different things, because one of them is the destruction of the ground that we live on, and the other is a law being fulfilled. How do these two fit together? Yeah, I think you're seeing that, but that's not until heaven and earth disappear. And again, I have a Greek Matthew, and Matthew is probably written in Hebrew originally. But the prophets speak about the old things no longer being remembered, the old things being done away with, and being replaced, being renewed by those new heavens and new earth we were talking about earlier in the Q&A tonight. So until that moment where this age that we live in, the rabbis talked about this age, and then there was the age to come. So until this age is done, until this age is done away with, until the broken parts of the world are done away with, and all that remains is the beautiful age to come, none of Torah will change until all of that has been accomplished. Your translation said fulfilled. My translation says accomplished. Whatever you want to, like, there is coming this moment where the old will be done away with and the new will remain. The two kind of overlap. The old world and the new world overlap right now, right? We live in a collision of these two worlds. But eventually there is coming a day when Jesus comes back, however you want to word it. There is coming a day where the old world will be done away with, and the only thing that will remain is the age to come, the new world, the new heavens and the new earth. All of that will remain. And Torah is going to live through that entire transaction until the old is past and the new has come. Torah will remain. So that's the conversation that's being had there. Oh, I love it. Rockin' for Him 97 said, that's exactly what I was looking for. That makes me feel so good, because I always sit here and I imagine you on the other end of your phone or your computer just getting so angry and cursing swear words and like, I'll never listen to the Bema podcast again. So I love it. Oh, hooray. We had to get all the way to the end. But we finally found Tron Hammer. I hope you're still with us. We did have your question. We found it. It was here the whole time, waiting for you all the way at the end. If you hung with us for 2 hours, may you be greatly rewarded. Dear Bema podcast team, in the early episodes, 2 through 6 or so of the podcast, you talk about God needing to rest, first from the creation because it was good, then from the destruction as a part of Noah's Ark, and generally, that rest is important to God. My question, do you believe that God partakes in Sabbath, or perhaps even needs to partake in Sabbath to maintain its sanctity? Background, my Christian host brother recommended your podcast to me as I'm reading the Bible as an atheist, and your podcast has truly helped me get a grasp of more your perspective on the importance of Sabbath, specifically in this regard. Keep up the good work. Your podcast has both answered questions for me as well as raised new ones. Kind regards from Germany. Wow. I'm glad you were able to join us because of our GMT edition timing, I hope. Brent wished he would have seen this and we would have moved it up earlier for you. But he's still here, even though it's midnight in Germany. Well, let's get this question answered, Tron Hammer, Marco. All right. Um, Marco, this is a great question of which the rabbis are split on, which tells you that is a good question. If the rabbis are split on it, you have asked a good question, right? So on one hand, the rabbis say, of course, God rests on the Sabbath. God didn't rest on the Sabbath in the first place because he needed to. He's not tired. He's not out of divine creativity units. He's resting because Sabbath is divine. You could even call it divine work. Like resting is part of what God does as God. And so God, of course, God rests. I've had lots of rabbinical conversations with rabbis today that talk about what we can't do that on Sabbath because God's resting too. At the same time, if God truly rested, all the cosmos would fall apart, some rabbis would point out. So God can't rest. God has to still be God somehow. I think of Jesus in John 5 when he says, my Father is always at work and has never stopped working. I don't know if that means on Sabbath. I don't know. Man, is that actually happening on a Sabbath when he makes that comment? My Father is always at, I think he might actually be healing on a Sabbath when he makes that comment. Because then that's going to keep me from saying like, yes, God rests on the Sabbath. So I think it's kind of like this mushy, weird middle in between. In a poetic way, yes, God rests on Sabbath. God actually started resting before we did. Like we're joining God in his Sabbath rest on Sabbath. And there's lots of rabbinical commentary about how God rests on Sabbath. On the flip side, I'd be careful before I held that with too heavy of hands, where I start to feel like, well, God can't do, or God isn't going to do, or God isn't. Like I would hold the Sabbath God rest poetically. I think about the empty tomb, not the empty tomb, excuse me. I think about the tomb with Jesus's body in it. What day did Jesus sit in the tomb? Sabbath. It feels like God's resting, even as the sun sits buried. And as soon as Sabbath is over, God stops resting and he comes out of the empty tomb. Brent says it was John 5, healing at the pool, and it was Sabbath. I don't know. I don't have a good place to land on that other than it's a great question. And I have done both. I have, with a twinkle in my eye, Marco, with a twinkle in my eye, I have said both things out of both sides of my mouth. Like if I need to, I have said, well, we know that God's resting on Sabbath. And then if I've needed to, I've also said, well, we know that God works and never, God's always at work and never stops working. So just know that I have said both with a twinkle in my eye on purpose, because I don't know exactly where to land. And maybe that's the beautiful point. But it's a great question that the rabbis are all over the map on. All right. There's a Facebook comment from Adam. This is is this a Hebraic or sensual theological idea to wrestle with? Taking the wedding imagery from Sinai and making the Torah an actual marital covenant with the Israelites, and Israel eventually became divorced from God in Old Testament, and Jesus had to die for there to be remarriage between Israel and God based on Torah remarriage restrictions. I don't follow this well. It comes up with Hebrew roots, friends. And if you follow me long enough, you know that I'm not a Hebrew roots guy. It's not what we're doing. And so that's good context there for your question, Adam. I don't think the marriage imagery stretches to that point. And you'd have to do a lot of gymnastics to show why the death of Jesus is actually restoring a marriage according to Torah restrictions. That would be somebody's trying to make those connections and trying to force that, in my opinion. And it's a little laden with the potential for supersessionism, potentially, where like, well, they broke their covenant. And I don't think that's certainly not what you're doing in your question, Adam. And I don't necessarily think it's even what your Hebrew roots friends are even doing. But the potential of that is there. The marriage imagery is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful one. Like any metaphor and any image, there's just such a danger sometimes in how far we use it, where we take it, all that kind of stuff. So It's a good question, and I'm not saying like absolutely not. I'm not there yet. I've resisted that idea. I've heard that idea before, and I've resisted it before. I haven't necessarily been forced to like totally work through all the implications or make a case one way or another. But that's still kind of where I'm at. That's just me. I could be missing something. Facebook comment from Dual. Any chance of doing a video teaching learning to find the chiasms? I've read Marty's first book, listened to the podcast, but I struggle to find them on my own. Yeah. Great question. I'm just going to say Dual. That's a great question. We just had my last Q&A on my last book tour leg. This was like the closing question that we had. And part of what we said, and Brian David, actually, he's our chiasm expert. We'll have him probably in a few months. We'll do a chiasm live stream. This would be a great question, by the way, for the chiasm live stream. But Brian's talked about it before. Somewhere in season 6, at the end of the John series, Brent will be able to find this episode for you. We had Brian David on at the very end. It was the last episode of Verse by Verse through John. And he talks about chiasms. And I believe at the end of that episode, he talks about his method, his how-to for episode 306, Brent says. And he gives some tools. And doesn't mean that chiasms are like memorizing scripture. Not all of our brains work the same way. Some of us are audio people. Some of us are visual people. Some of us are, and so his methods may not work fantastic for you. But there are some how-tos and some helps in that episode. I would give you a hall pass and let you go listen to that episode. But most importantly, put all that aside. Everything that we learn about here in the podcast and in this journey it's all just it's like learning another language. It takes time, and you have to work with it, and you have to do it, and you have to flex those muscles. And so give yourself a ton of grace. I would bet you're doing far better. Nobody learns how to find chiasms and then shows up the next month and is like, oh my gosh, look at all these chiasms. Nobody's doing that, nor are you, but nobody else is either. This is something you got to learn. You have to learn how to see. You have to do it with some other people. You can't just sit in your own study and learn how to do chiasms. You do it kind of with other people, and you get to see like, oh, I'm seeing, okay. Like there's engagement there. So, hey, give yourself a ton of grace, because this takes a long time to learn how to speak the language of chiasm fluently. It just takes a ton of time. And I just got this question in, where was I? California, Sacramento. I got this question in Sacramento because this is such a common, somebody else just asked this question at a gathering, because that's a common experience. So give yourself a ton of grace. Yeah, because you have to learn this stuff, and you pick it up over time. And I find you never think that you're moving. You don't think you're growing in the moment. If you hang with it, look back 5 years from now, and you'll be like, oh wow, I've actually moved quite a bit. Like I even know what a chiasm is. I've even found a few of them, and that's better than not even knowing what they were. And then 5 years after that, like, you will grow, but in the moment you don't feel like you're making up any ground. But then you look back on a journey and you go, holy cow, like I've really learned. I've really grown. So I just, with all due respect to your question, I never buy it when people say I'm struggling to learn this. No, you're not. You're just learning it. You're just learning it. Learning is always a slog. Learning is never a clean transaction. Learning is a struggle. That's what learning is. So give yourself a ton of grace, because you need it. All of us do when we're learning this stuff. So, Brent, I just finished a Q&A with maybe 30 seconds left to the top of the hour.
Yeah, you did.
All right, everybody. Well, our next Q&A is currently scheduled. Did Elle ever get back to me? She sure didn't. Hasn't even looked at her message. Oh, well. We'll let you guys know, everyone. Watch your schedules. Watch your newsletters. Watch your Baymom Messenger.
Watch BemaEvents.com, our new news website.
BemaEvents.com, where you can get all the deets. Yeah, watch all those. Sorry, I just got distracted by my messages. Yeah, watch all those, and we'll see if Elle wants to do September, or if she wants to do October, and we'll let you know. But yeah, our next one is currently scheduled for Sunday, September 20th. It's about a month from now, exactly, but it's going to be at 8 p.m. So sorry to all of our people from Germany, from Hungary, from Aussie.
Theoretically, it should be an easier time for the Australians, but
Absolutely.
I guess they're getting up early for this. That's great.
Well, absolutely, they are. All right. Well, that's all I got, Brent. If you don't have anything else.
Did I have anything else? I don't think so. I think that was it.
All right.
I think
we're
good.
It's still 6
good
p.m.
time. I've been Brent Billings, live from the Boiler Room in Spokane, Washington.
That's right.
Talk to you all soon.